John Kerry, former senator, former Secretary of State, obviously another person like most of us who have had cancer touch their lives in so many different ways. Great to talk to you.
I'm glad to be with you guys. Thanks a lot for doing all this. A great effort, and you're always there for it, so thank you.
Hey, John, I mean, you've dealt with cancer in your life personally, prostate cancer. Your father, your wife, Teresa Heinz, is a breast cancer survivor. And when you got diagnosed with prostate cancer, it was back in 2003 in the midst of a political campaign. How did you deal with that, and how were you able to continue? How did you continue to really, and fight the good fight and get through the campaign?
Well, I probably pushed the limits a little bit, to be honest with you. In retrospect, we always think we can do things, and people tell you otherwise. Say get a lot of rest, and you got to take it easy. But I think about 10 days after I had my operation, I was on the road campaigning, and it probably cost me more than I thought at the time. Not advisable, but I just I dealt with it because I had to. I mean, I was running. I didn't want to quit. And I knew I had to take steps that were going to convince people that I wasn't, going to be handicapped by the process. So it was fairly straight out. And so I had an operation, had my prostate out, and got the message I wanted from the doctors when they said your margins are clean, which is the most important words you can hear when you're in that situation. And went on from there. But, a lot of people aren't so lucky. My dad had it and died of it. I mean, he was on this sort of wait and watch program where you kind of watch your PSA and see what's happening. And it just got away from them, unfortunately, and got into his bones, and ultimately he passed away from it. So there's just, I think every family has been affected by cancer in so many different ways, and there's so many, unfortunately, different forms. And I just had a friend who was diagnosed the other day with thyroid cancer, and so the mission is as powerful as it's always been. But we're making progress. I mean, that's what's important. The other day when the PMC, that's one of the most amazing charitable sporting events in the world. And I met somebody just 2 days ago who told me that they're going to try to replicate the same kind of thing to do fundraising in Philadelphia, modeled on what has happened in Boston and Massachusetts with the Pan Mass Challenge. So we're making progress, but we got a long way to go still. Got a lot of work to do.
John, you mentioned the PMC, and you weren't just a guest there shaking hands. You were actually a participant, from what I understand. How was that experience?
Well, I could only participate. I want to be full disclosure here. I could only do about 10 miles of it because I had to leave for Africa to lead the delegation that was monitoring the elections in Kenya just the other day. But so I ran out to ride because I had a lot of friends who were riding, and I wanted to see them off at the start. It's just a great event. The energy of that event, the input everybody gives to it, the training they go through to get ready for it, the money they raise by reaching out to people through the year. $50 million is an extraordinary amount of money that gets raised in one sporting event. And obviously, they do it over a period of time. But it's one of the great fundraising events for anti-cancer efforts anywhere in the world, and we should be very proud of it.
I would be remiss if I did not, having the former Secretary of State and former U.S. Senator on the line, to at least ask you a couple of questions, because we're living in some troubled times right now. Based on your experience dealing with North Korea, is forceful, strong rhetoric the best strategy to come to some type of peaceful resolution with North Korea, in your mind?
Well, not a public rhetorical war such as we've been seeing in the last few days. It just backs people into corners, and it raises the prospect of miscalculation. I mean, you'll recall in the Cuban Missile Crisis when we came as close to nuclear war as any time. I was at college at the time. We did not go through that kind of bellicose back and forth, almost, high school kind of trash talk. I mean, it just is not a responsible way to approach this. You can send tough messages in plenty of ways, and nobody has to doubt that the United States of America has the power and the willingness, because we've proven it all through the last century and again and again. We're ready to stand up for our values and for our rights. But you have to leave the door open to be able to find a way to solve these problems. Let me be specific. I don't know, from 1947 or so, I mean, shortly after World War II, until 1990, we had 50,000 warheads pointed at us from the former Soviet Union. And, there were moments of tension and moments of toughness, but you never had this kind of sloppy back and forth that we're seeing right now. And we dealt with it. We dealt with the fact that we each had 50,000 warheads, and we finally got our senses together and negotiated our way down to 1,500, which is about what we have today. And we had an entire joint denuclearization program. So having dealt with Iran in the last few years and put together an agreement which makes it certain that we will know if they are moving towards a weapon or not, and right now they're not, and they have created a regime which allows us to test that. We're in a decent place, and everybody says, "Oh, we've tried it for 20 years with North Korea. We can't. We failed." That's not true. The fact is, we really only had sanctions in place in the last few years. And like Iran, it took us about 5 years to get the Iranian sanctions into a place where they really were biting and hard. We are still doing that now. The Trump administration, and I give them credit for this, is taking the next steps in the sanctions by tightening the noose. And each step we've been able to bring China further along and get them to do more. That's what we have to do for the time being anyway. I'm not saying that ultimately you may not have a problem that leads to, unfortunately, to conflict, but we shouldn't be promoting it in an active kind of way.
All right, one more question. We may have demonstrations here similar to what we had in Charlottesville over the weekend, this coming weekend here in Boston. Obviously, the people that are coming in are speaking of hate, but we also know in this country we have the right to speak at our free will. What do you do? What do you do in that situation, John? They have the right to demonstrate, yet on the other hand...
You have to. I mean, look, it's a pretty clear road as far as I'm concerned. You have to absolutely guarantee the right of people to peaceful protest. We are the United States of America. We value the First Amendment. You have a right to say even things that we hate and we don't like. But you don't have a right to incite and create violence purposefully. And what we need is a very careful management by the authorities, the law enforcement authorities, and avoid provocation, respect the First Amendment, but make sure that whatever takes place is peaceful and arranged in a way that you're not creating an inevitability to conflict between different voices. The bottom line is that even though somebody has a right to say something that is really pretty awful and abhorrent and contrary to our values, none of us have to respect it or be silent about it. And the fact is that in the United States, I mean, we settled this issue a long time ago. I thought that that the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazis and white supremacists are not the normal order or have any rightful place in the legitimate political spectrum of America. They should be ostracized. They should be isolated. They should be condemned. And it shouldn't take 48 hours to do that. It should be an instantaneous reaction because they are counter to everything that the United States of America was founded to be, and all of the values which we practice in our day-to-day lives. We are a tolerant country, and we are built on immigrants for every century. And it's just inappropriate, completely inappropriate to allow them to hijack America's political agenda in any way whatsoever.
Secretary John Kerry, great. Thanks for calling in. We really appreciate it, helping out the cause today for the Jimmy Fund.
Great to be with you. Thanks for what you do, guys. Take care.
You got
Bye-bye.
it. John Kerry.